The Jo Cox murder trial begins. The secret plan to cut health services. And Downing Street plays down the Trump and Farage relationship. You're watching 5 News Tonight. A court hears the man accused of murdering MP Jo Cox shouted "Britain first" as he shot and stabbed her. As the winter pressures begin for the NHS, plans to cut services are still being made. And Downing Street denies Nigel Farage could be a go-between with Donald Trump as the next president urges his supporters to tone it down.
Don't be afraid. We are going to bring our country back, but certainly don't be afraid.
Also tonight, we're discussing the worrying rise in online bullying. I'll be joined by one mother whose teenage son took his own life after years of being picked on. And have you been lucky enough to catch a glimpse of the supermoon this evening? We'll be chatting about its closest approach in decades. Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. The trial of the man accused of killing the MP Jo Cox has begun at the Old Bailey. The court was told how witnesses heard 53-year-old Thomas Mair shouted "Britain first" during the alleged attack in June. He's accused of shooting and stabbing the mother of 2 outside her constituency surgery in the town of Birstall near Leeds, as Simon Viger reports.
5 months after her death, the man accused of murdering Jo Cox arrived at the Old Bailey in a prison van. 53-year-old Thomas Mair denies the charges and sat impassively throughout the hearing. Jo Cox's family arrived at court to hear the opening of the prosecution case. Jo was the new MP representing Batley and Spen, the Yorkshire constituency where she grew up. Ms Cox was shot and stabbed in the street after carrying out meetings with constituents at Birstall Library. The jury was told this was a cowardly attack. Jo Cox was attacked from behind and it was a brutal murder. She was shot 3 times and suffered multiple stab wounds. The prosecution said it was a planned and premeditated murder for a political or ideological cause. The jury heard the attack happened 1 week before the EU referendum. Jo Cox was a passionate campaigner for Remain. The court heard the evidence from a colleague of the MP who was with her at the time. The prosecution said she hit the defendant on a number of occasions with her handbag, but she was forced to retreat in fear of her own life being taken. During the course of the attack, she heard the defendant say, "Britain first. This is for Britain. Britain will always come first." More evidence will be heard in the coming days in the case that shocked the country and devastated a family.
Well, Simon sent us this update from the Old Bailey just a short time ago.
Well, I was sitting just a few feet away on the press benches and Thomas Mair was in the dock and he showed no emotion during the hearing today. He was looking down most of the time. The jury heard during his police interviews he said nothing at all, but the prosecution case is clear. He had the means, the motive, he researched it. They showed some distant CCTV of the attack to the jury, which the prosecution says proves that he returned to the scene of the crime to check that Jo Cox was fatally wounded. The jury also heard that when the police later on tackled him, they found a gun on him, and he said to them, "I am a political activist." Thomas Mair denies all the charges against him.
Simon Viger at the Old Bailey. Now, if hospital, an A&E, maternity ward or another specialist health service near you is being lined up for the chop, you'd want to know about it. Well, there are claims that health bosses across England are making plans to save money by closing NHS units, and they're trying to keep it a secret. The group The King's Fund says patients and others are not being consulted about the plans. Our health correspondent Catherine Jones has more.
With the money it's given, our health service simply can't keep up with the demands upon it. So over the last year, major plans have been drawn up to revolutionise the way healthcare is delivered across England.
The basic aim of these plans is a good one: prevent people becoming sick and treat them closer to home when they are. But of course, there is also a massive pressure for these proposals to cut costs. And that means the axe is going to have to fall somewhere. This hospital in South London, for example, is one that is slated for possible closure. And it's the way these decisions are being made, shrouded in secrecy, that is causing such alarm.
I think we should know more. I think they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes a little bit.
We are the ones that use the service, you know. It's not for someone in a suit to decide.
Joe Public should know what's going on. Joe Public pays for the National Health Service.
The campaign group fighting to save St Helier Hospital say their efforts to shine a light on the process haven't been welcomed.
By the time the public realise it could well be too late to stop this. When the public do find out, I think they'll be furious, but it's death by 1,000 cuts so far.
As well as a hospital closure for South London, where else might the axe fall? Well, in Birmingham, the merger of the city's women's and children's hospitals is mooted. In the North East, Teesside looks likely to lose an emergency department, and at least one A&E in the Cheshire and Merseyside region will be downgraded to a minor injuries unit. But little more is known, as NHS England has insisted local managers keep plans secret until they've been centrally vetted. NHS England has now said it'll allow extra time for public consultation, but the body that champions patients' rights, Healthwatch England, fears this secrecy row may put people off.
What must happen is that people stay open on both sides, that the public feels able and welcome to have its say, and that NHS managers and all those people who are doing this thinking about what is essentially the biggest set of changes to our health service, that they stay open and willing to listen.
The 44 plans covering all parts of England will be published in the coming weeks, and public consultation will begin in the new year. Only then will it become clear just how much of the NHS's new direction is actually negotiable. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Next, for most of us, being online is just a part of our everyday lives these days. And for teenagers, it is vital when it comes to things like homework and keeping in touch with their mates. But there's a fresh warning about the downsides because of the amount of bullying that goes on. According to the charity Childline, there's been a huge rise in children needing counselling after being targeted. In a moment, I'll be talking to one mum whose son killed himself because he was a victim of online bullying. But first, Layla Hayes has been asking pupils at one school for their experiences.
This is how these 14-year-old pupils say online bullying makes them feel.
Who here has ever received nasty or hateful messages online?
These Year 10 students say it's a growing problem.
People think they can hide behind a screen and say what they want, say what they feel, whereas in person it's a lot harder.
It can bring down your self-esteem, like you don't want to go out into the public anymore because you don't know what they can do, if they can find you or they might target you.
As more people feel peer pressure to post more things, and if one friend is in an argument, they feel the need to join in, even though it's got nothing to do with them.
Everyone gets bullied all the time. I think everyone has been bullied at least once in their life.
Online bullying has increased by 88% in the last 5 years. And last year, more than 4,500 children received counselling for online bullying. Childline say this type of bullying now affects children as young as 7 years old. The NSPCC say parents have to be aware of the dangers of the internet.
It's hard for children to ever escape messages and tormenting online. So it's so important that controls are set and that boundaries are set for children. You know, taking away the technology is not the solution, but having regular and conversations with your child and constantly talking to children about keeping safe online is the key to helping children recover from bullying.
The teenagers we spoke to said parents and teachers can help.
I think they just need to be aware of what's going on and knowing how to support their child if their child is being affected by this. I don't think it's ever going to stop, but it's just the way that people deal with it.
And this is how our 14-year-olds would feel if online bullying didn't exist. They say more should be done to prevent it. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
With me now is Lucy Alexander, whose son Felix took his own life when he was just 17 years old after being bullied. And Lucy, it had been going on for several years, from the age of about 10. What was Felix like before that, in primary school?
Really happy, really outgoing, funny, very clever little boy. And always had a joke, had a story, and centre of attention. So
he was going to secondary school, and that's coinciding with the rise of online gaming and social media and all the kind of thing that Felix engaged in, as many other kids his age did, that made a real difference to his life.
Yes, it was a huge, huge difference. His age group, their entire social life was conducted sort of almost virtually. They didn't really go out together. They didn't sort of have a kickabout in the park. There weren't a lot of local friends. It's all done in their own rooms and sort of talking online to each other. And Initially, I didn't even let him have a lot of social media, but he felt even more excluded because of that.
Because your two older children, obviously grown up ahead of him, you probably thought, well, you know, I've dealt with them and the way they live their teenage lives, I'll do the same with him. But things had changed in the meantime.
Yeah, and changed beyond my recognition. I hadn't kept up with it. I didn't understand the way they were interacting with each other. And it was just a very different world, very different world.
It clearly just got all too much for Felix at the age of 17, and he didn't leave many sort of clues behind, except for one fairly stark idea of what had been going on.
Yeah, I mean, we had talked all the way through, and I knew that he'd been targeted. I knew that he was really unhappy, particularly when he was up to 14. But as it got later, he normalised it, I think, predominantly to protect me. But he did leave some screenshots of online conversations of some of the stuff that had been happening to him and some of the things that he'd been made to feel and how worthless he'd been made to feel.
And there was one message in particular?
Yeah, there was one message in particular where he was just bombarded with various cruel bits of conversation and in one part told to hang himself.
Well, clearly the answer is not kids phoning up Childline in their droves to seek advice and solace on how to deal with this. It has to start, well, at home, in their peer groups and in school. What do you think can be done to get kids, young as they are, to understand the idea of cause and effect?
It has to start very young. It has to start when they first get a mobile phone. They get a mobile phone now
when
about 10.
When should that be?
10? Well, they get it about 10. That's the average. They are accessing the whole internet then. There's no parental controls, very few parental controls on their phones, and very difficult to police for parents. So you have to be talking to your children, you have to be understanding what platforms they're using, you have to police it to a certain extent, but you also have to interpret what they're seeing.
Plenty of parents will recognise what you said about him being in primary school, happy, enjoying it, and plenty of parents have a lot to do with the primary schools their children go to. Do you think that relationship between the school, the pupil and the parent should continue through secondary school? Yes,
I think it should be encouraged. I think there should be much more interaction between parents and teachers. I think there is a reluctance on teachers' behalf to bring parents in and to involve them.
There's too much of a boundary at the school gates.
Oh, absolutely. They make their own way to school a lot of the time, and you want your children to be independent, but at the same time there has to be communication. When a parent comes up with a problem, I think the family should be involved a lot quicker and a lot sooner.
Just finally, Lucy, do you think as a problem, apart from the charities who have to deal with it, it's being taken seriously enough?
No, I don't think it has been up until now, but I think teachers are at a loss as to what to do, and they need more training. And there are charities, Place to Be being one of them, where they're going into schools and actually supporting teachers to support students and getting students to support each other in peer mentorship.
All right, Lucy, many thanks indeed for coming in to talk to me.
Thank you.
Now, a man has been convicted of murdering a police officer and then trying to dispose of his body in a bath of acid. PC Gordon Semple met his killer on a dating app in April before going round to his flat in South London. Stefano Brizzi admitted the killing but claimed it happened by accident while high on drugs. And the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, has been questioned about a rape allegation from 2010 in Sweden. He says the allegation is false and is politically motivated. Prosecutors paid a visit to the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been living for the past 4 years, fearing extradition. The Prime Minister has been at pains to stress the strength of the relationship between Britain and America today as she prepares for her first major speech about foreign policy. Theresa May was the 10th world leader to be called by the President-elect Donald Trump, the 10th. The first British politician, though, to shake his hand was the UKIP leader Nigel Farage. Now, one former minister has described that as an ego trip, not a diplomatic one, while Downing Street says there will be no third person in the relationship. Let's speak to our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, who's in Westminster now. Tessa, just how rattled is number 10 by Mr Farage's visit and the accompanying picture we all saw over the weekend?
Not at all. That's what they say anyway. A spokesperson at pains to stress that diplomatic staff have been talking to Trump's team for months now, and they talk about that phone call between Theresa May and Donald Trump, during which he extended an invitation for her to visit Washington at the earliest possible opportunity, and apparently also said that he hoped they could foster a relationship as strong as that between Thatcher and Reagan. It must have been a little bit embarrassing, though, frankly, because just hours before Nigel Farage arrived at Trump Towers, Theresa May had said that he was irrelevant. But let's face it, that is the image we've all been talking about this weekend, isn't it? Boris Johnson, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary, has been talking in Brussels today. Don't forget, over the last year, he described Donald Trump as betraying stupefying ignorance and also said he was unfit to be president. He's changed his tune today.
Well, I think there's a lot to be positive about, and it's very important not to prejudge the president-elect or his administration. Donald Trump, as I've said before, is a deal maker, and I think that can be a good thing for Britain, but it can also be a good thing for Europe, and that's, I think, what we need to focus on today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that's what Theresa May wants to focus on too. She's got a big foreign policy speech tonight. She's going to say change is in the air. She's not wrong.
Tessa, thanks very much indeed. So last night, Donald Trump went on TV to address the nation that's been divided by his victory. He said he hated to hear about reports that his supporters had been committing hate crimes and asked them to stop it. He also appeared to start backtracking on some of the more controversial promises from his campaign, those plans to build a wall on the Mexican border and also to jail Hillary Clinton. Warren Nettleford was watching.
Following Election Day, there were protests right across America. But he really is president-elect. And this is his message to America and the world.
Don't be afraid. We are going to bring our country back. But certainly don't be afraid.
I want to ask you about the tweet.
In his first major interview since being elected, Donald Trump was challenged about abuse from some of his supporters towards minorities.
Do you want to say anything to those people?
I would say don't do it. That's terrible. Because I'm going to bring this country together.
They're harassing Latinos, Muslims.
I am so saddened to hear that. And I say stop it. If it helps. I will say this, and I'll say it right to the camera, stop it.
So what about his more outrageous election claims?
Are you really going to build a wall?
Yes.
They're talking about a fence in the Republican Congress.
Sure.
Would you accept a fence?
For certain areas I would, but certain areas the wall is more appropriate. I'm very good at this. It's called construction. But
on the campaign trail, Donald Trump took an aggressive stance towards Hillary Clinton.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
But now she's defeated, he sounds more conciliatory.
I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt them. They're good people. I don't want to hurt them.
Mr. Trump and President Obama may have shared this awkward handshake in the White House, but he said their meeting was constructive.
We never discussed what we said about each other. I said terrible things about him. He said terrible things about me. We never, ever discussed what we said about each other.
There was no awkwardness.
I'll be honest, from my standpoint, zero.
Mrs. Trump was asked about trying to rein him in on Twitter.
So you never say to him, come on.
I did.
She does.
Lighten up.
Yes, of course, I did many times from the beginning of the campaign. But
does he listen to you?
Sometimes he listens, sometimes he doesn't.
I'm not a big tweeter. I mean, I don't.
Chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, will be his chief of staff. And he says his administration will be businesslike.
I think I'm a sober person. I think the press tries to make you into something a little bit different. In my case, a little bit of a wild man. I'm not. I'm actually not. I'm a very sober person.
The president-elect will become President Trump in just 9 weeks. With the support of his family, his changing title is already leading to a change in tone. Warren Nettleford, 5 News.
Still to come on 5 News tonight. Why dementia is now the biggest cause of death in England and Wales, overtaking heart disease. And look out for the supermoon, the stunning view lighting up our skies tonight. But why is it so big and bright this evening? Find out in a few moments. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News tonight. Dementia is now the leading cause of death in England and Wales. The Office for National Statistics says the change is largely because people are living for longer. And there's also been a change in the way that deaths are now recorded. Last year, more than 61,000 people in England and Wales died because of dementia. That's 11.6% of all registered deaths, overtaking heart disease for the very first time. The figure is even higher for women as well, with Alzheimer's disease and dementia accounting for more than 15% of deaths. With me now is Dave Bell, a special dementia nurse for the charity Dementia UK. Good to see you, Dave. Now, in some ways, knowing that it is the leading cause of death is a good thing. It's a good thing we now know this.
It's a very good thing we now know this. I think it's an increasing awareness of dementia in general anyway. I think the figures need a bit of unpicking because actually it's not always the way death certificates are reported. There's often a contributory factor to death as well. So Public Health England have reported this as being where dementia is involved in deaths. It's not necessarily the thing that people die from.
No, quite. It's not dementia that's causing their death, but if they're dying of, say, pneumonia, absolutely, dementia might play a part in that not being cured, for example.
What we're really pleased about is that actually dementia is now being recognised by a lot of GPs and certainly in hospitals as being something that contributes to death.
Well, exactly, because it used to be the case that cancer was just put down to old age, and now, of course, we know a lot better. Yeah. And the same with other illnesses. Yeah. Is it the case that dementia now is the last thing, that we just can't put it down to old age anymore?
The single biggest risk factor for dementia of any sort is age, of course. So actually, as we grow older, once you're over the age of 80, you've got about a 1 in 5 chance. Once you're over the age of 90, about a 1 in 3 chance of developing some form of dementia. And that's not just dementia, because at that age you're also susceptible to other long-term conditions, heart disease, diabetes, chronic arthritis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, all of those things. So actually what dementia does is reduces your ability to recover from acute episodes of those other illnesses as well. So if my memory is affected, I'll forget to take my tablets.
Quite.
I won't cooperate with physiotherapy following a hip fracture, for example, something like
that. Look, Dave, I mean, the government, and in particularly when David Cameron was Prime Minister, made a big thing about trying to solve this dementia problem. The look on your face suggests they haven't made many inroads.
No, I think it's been fantastic. It was called the Prime Minister's Challenge. It was set up by David Cameron, and a lot of the areas where work has been done have really improved things.
Okay.
There's a huge number of people who are much more aware of dementia now. Diagnosis of dementia has improved.
And now
diagnostic support, yeah. And where I think it's important is it gives us a chance to support families. I mean, I'm an Admiral nurse. I work with families of people with dementia, and it helps us understand how to improve their lives and recognise symptoms.
So a step in the right direction, but nothing more than that at this time. Dave, many thanks indeed.
You're welcome.
Britain's big 6 energy companies are to be investigated over claims they're hiding their true profits. An investigation found the cost of supplying a home with gas and electricity could be well below what families pay in their bills. The industry's representatives say the facts have been misrepresented, though. And the world is set to experience its hottest year ever recorded, according to the World Meteorological Organization. 2016 is on course to break the record that was set by 2015. The most significant factor continues to be carbon dioxide emissions. Now, if you take a peek at the sky this evening, you could be in for a very special sight if it's not too cloudy. The British weather allowing, you could see what astronomers are calling a supermoon. That's when the moon passes close to the Earth, appearing especially big and bright. And right now, it's at its closest since the 1940s. And as Minnie Stevenson explains, it's already proved quite the sight around the world.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just take a moment to appreciate this. A supermoon, so close you could almost touch it. And tonight, the largest moon in nearly 70 years will light up the sky. In Sydney, this is a taster of what's to come. To the States and in Washington, where moon spotting almost looked like a competitive sport. To us Earthlings, the moon will appear 30% brighter and 14% bigger than usual. Now, it may still sound like a long way, but at 11:21 this morning, the moon was at its closest to Earth at over 221,000 miles away. A full moon is expected to appear at its biggest and brightest since 1948, and you won't see a supermoon like it until 2034. Given the next sighting is nearly 20 years away, you do not want to miss it. So we're consulting the experts at the Royal Observatory, where they've been studying the moon since 1665. So they should know.
The great thing about the moon is that it's pretty much visible to anybody, even if you're in a light polluted city. So all you need are clear skies. It often looks most impressive when it's close to the horizon, so when it's rising just around about 6 p.m. But actually, if you can see it in the sky, go out and have a look. The only problem is if it's cloudy, you won't see it.
And don't worry if the clouds spoil your view this evening. Experts say tomorrow night there'll be another chance to see it. So plenty of time to get a selfie with the supermoon. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
That's like the end of ET there. I'm joined now by Radmila Topalovic, who's an astronomer with the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. And it's pretty simple, this, isn't it? It's just the moon is a bit closer to us than normal.
Sure.
But why is it?
OK, well, what's quite interesting about the moon is that the orbit isn't circular. It's actually elliptical, which basically means slightly egg-shaped. So that means that the distance between the Earth and the moon does vary throughout the month, and that's how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth once,
And
around about a month.
Is this, Radmila, as close as it ever gets? Or can it get even closer than this?
It all depends on various things. There's gravitational interaction between the moon and the Earth and the sun, and that can affect exactly, how close it can get and at what time during its month. What's so exciting about this supermoon is that it's the closest it has been since 1948, so in 70 years, and it's actually going to be, appear just a little bit bigger than your average moon. They're calling it the super duper moon because actually there are other supermoons.
Oh, really?
Where the moon appears a little bit closer, but this is the closest in 70 years, so that's what makes it a little bit more exciting.
We asked our viewers to send in pictures of their super-duper moon observations. Gaynor MacDonald tweeted this picture to us. You can just make out its size in comparison to those buildings there. We've got one from Dennis Richardson from Gotham in Nottinghamshire, sent us in these snaps. Now, you really get a sense of how big it is compared to those pylons there. He tells us it's very cloudy this evening. Steve Clark from Swindon was lucky enough to be in Copenhagen last night to capture this photo, and it looks ginormous there. It really is a super duper moon. It's going to be a while, isn't it, Radmila, before it comes back? Another 30 years, I'm right to say, or 20 years?
November
like
2034, is when it's
November.
going to be, at its closest super-duper moon level.
OK, so this time of the year, is that anything to do with it, if it's going to be November again, 2034?
Not really. As I said, there's so many things that kind of affect the position of the moon.
OK.
But there will be a supermoon, a standard default supermoon next month, December the 14th. So if you miss it because of the cloud cover tonight, then December the 14th, head out. And also just
Thanks.
the Gemini.
Weather next from Claire. Here she is. Bye-bye for now.